Hey there, welcome to the Storytime with Ellie podcast, and I am your host, Ellie. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce a guest. Her name is Cheryl Parker. She has dedicated her life to providing support and guidance during one of life's most difficult times. As a certified grief specialist and an author, My Good Grief Healing from Loss Workbook, she offers practical tools and compassionate advice to empower women to find their footing and rebuild their lives. Join us as we dive into her personal journey, her work, and the transformative power of healing through grief. Let's welcome Cheryl Parker.
Hi, thanks so
Come
much for
on
having
in.
me.
Hey, how are
Uh-huh.
you?
Good, how are you?
I am good. Thank you for coming on to the podcast today, Story Time with Ellie.
Yeah, my
And I
pleasure.
am, yeah, thank you. You have a lot to say. We're going to talk about your book and about how you serve or how you teach people and help people to overcome or through grief, correct?
Yeah,
Right? Just
yeah.
double checking. Um, so how did you get into this? How did you get into what made you pick grief?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's like you don't
Yeah,
typically want to pick grief.
right, exactly.
It
That's what
yeah,
it's like, oh,
yeah. Oh,
be happy,
let's do talk about this.
Yeah, it's like, I'll be
No,
happy.
it was a personal experience of mine. Our family came down with the flu virus, but 25 years ago now. I had little kids, and my son come home with the flu bug, and Sean was down and out for about a week, and then I got it, and then my daughter Rachel got it, and it was just one of those bad flu bugs that took a while to work through. And after a week, I just assumed like Rachel was gonna recover and head back to school,
Hmm.
and she just plummeted even worse with her flu bug. So we took her to a local hospital, and they told us that she had a condition called ITP, where your antibodies attack the platelets instead of the virus. And so typically what happens is your platelets get to a really low level, and then they start multiplying and you recover. And it's something that you then have to monitor for a while. But in less than 1% chance, you can have a spontaneous bleed if your platelets get too low. And Rachel was in that percentage, and she got a bleed in her brain, which if it had been in any of the other organs, it would have presented differently, and that's recoverable too. But hers was in her brain, and by the time they figured out what was going on, and they did brain surgery while they were pumping her full of platelets so that they could operate on her first of all, and then they did brain surgery to remove her front left lobe of her brain so that it would release the pressure. And but after years after hours of surgery,
Yeah.
they realized that her brain was too swollen and she wasn't going to survive. So, at the time, they said, have you considered organ donation? And I said, no, but she had, and their mouths dropped. I was like, what?
Yeah,
Well,
8 years
not,
old.
I know. 5 weeks before this,
Scary.
I'm reading a newspaper article about a little boy who had undergone a double lung transplant. He was sitting in a hospital bed and his arms were extended in victory. And Rachel was asking me questions about it, like, why does he look happy? He looks like he's in a hospital. And I'm explaining to
Mm.
her that he's happy because he's got new lungs. And so then she went back to playing, and because I explained how he got the new lungs, and about 5 minutes later she pops her head up and she goes, so when I die I want to give my organs so I can save kids.
Oh my
And I
gosh, this is
thought,
sad.
oh
Scary.
my
Sorry.
goodness, like
Mm.
imagine her like embracing the giving part. I thought I had grossed her out, and that's why she took off to go play.
Yeah, but see, yeah.
So I was so proud in that moment that she processed it in her little 8-year-old brain,
Mm.
and then 5 weeks later I'm faced with this question. It was like, oh my goodness, talk about divine intervention.
Oh my goodness,
So
totally.
I let them harvest her organs, and she was able to donate her heart, her lungs, and her two corneas. So she gave a baby who was blinded at birth sight. She gave a toddler who was blinded in surgery
Oh my
sight.
God.
She saved a 12-year-old girl with her lungs. They were actually flown, like I'm in Ontario, Canada, and her lungs were flown down to Pittsburgh and
Wow. What a
transplanted
story.
into, yeah. And then her heart went into a 7-year-old girl and saved her life. So,
S-
through
Oh,
that whole process, at the time, Mike Harris and Don Cherry were putting together the Trillium Gift of Life organization here in Ontario, and they're really wanting to advocate people sharing their wishes about organ donation to their
hmm.
families rather than just signing their licenses. So Rachel became a bit of a poster child for that. And
Yes.
I did a lot of public speaking, sharing the story, and I saw how, like, you can take a tragic event and inspire people. And I thought, wow, that is so, so powerful.
You, you,
And
you
like,
still need that strength, and you had that strength, and no one ever wants to have to face that. But
no,
it's just amazing how, like you said, that one, her life, several others now are living, but how she was so prepared in a kind of
yeah,
a wow.
yeah,
So that
yeah. It
helped you
was
a lot through your grieving,
It
because
it did. I
to
mean,
some
now
degree.
mind you, I was in the acute stages of grief for the first year doing all this public speaking. I would park my grief at the door and I would
Hmm.
speak, and then I go home and I'm like flat out for
Mm.
2 days. So I mean, it wasn't like I was like, oh, just
But no,
sifting
but
above the.
the strength
But
came from your daughter, even though
yeah,
she had passed away. Just
yeah,
right.
yeah, absolutely. Like
Oh,
she
oh
just
my God.
inspired me to, to want to inspire others. And it also, while I was doing all that public speaking, which I'm finally getting around to answering your question, is that I saw so many people hurting, and I thought, okay, once I go through my process, I know that when I'm on the other side of this, I want to help others. Because I thought,
Mhm.
like, all these people are hurting, and all the lessons I was learning going through my own grief process, I thought there's no education out there for us about
No,
this, not how to grieve ourselves, not how to support others. And so that's why I chose grief. Because
no,
I
I
thought,
got you.
well,
No,
if not me, then who,
right.
So
No, I get it. You filled a void. You're
yeah.
filling a void that's not, some people could say, oh, and this is some more questions. Like I said, I was writing some questions down, but we'll
Mhm.
just roll it right in here. Sometimes they'll say, you're grieving, family. Yes, family is important, but you need someone, not just the physical aspect of your family. They have to know how to speak with you. Do you help that too? Other than the grieving person going through the grief, do you help the family members too, to help them handle the
Yes,
person
yes,
that's
I do.
grieving? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah.
Mm.
Sometimes when people come to me, they've experienced their own grief, but then they
Mhm.
learn themselves how to support others too, because it's not something that's taught.
No.
And I mean, yeah, I've done workshops with, family members.
Okay.
Like there's an addiction center that, helps them through their addictions, which is, grief and loss too. But so is the family grieving. They're grieving the person that they
Right.
used to
Right.
know, right? So
Hmm.
one of the biggest lessons I learned was that grief isn't just associated with death. There's like this domino and all these other um, losses that you
Hmm.
experience from the death and from other situations in life too. Because when Rachel died, like, I was doing everything I knew to do, and yet, somebody pointed out to me that you're not just grieving her death, you're grieving like all of the things associated with her, but you're also grieving like all the things that shoulda, woulda, coulda, and all the future things, the things you will not get to do. But also, I had gone through a divorce. I had had 3 miscarriages. Like there was all this, like I had this like trail of losses that had never been acknowledged, never been expressed, and never been resolved. So when
Mm.
the big blow of Rachel's death happened, all those other losses came to the surface too. So
Oh, so
I
you
was
had,
grieving my
mm,
whole life.
right. But you
Like,
turned it into a passion. And it sounds like
yeah,
a passion, but you did.
yeah,
But to help
yeah,
others, and that's what's needed.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah,
Wow. Interesting.
yeah, yeah.
So,
It's been quite the journey.
it's a journey, and you're still on your journey from,
I still, it
yeah.
never ends. It never ends.
So what do you do what's your, I don't want to say your daily day, but what do you do now? You're in seminars. So you have seminars, you go to speaking arena. What do you do
Yeah,
now to get
it's
out
kind
there
of,
so people can get a hold of you too? That we'll do that at the end,
yeah,
but
sure.
let's just
Yeah.
talk. Yeah.
It's kind of morphed. Like I started out by just doing workshops and inviting
Hmm.
people into the workshops and having groups. And I just love the group dynamic and how people then in their own
Yep.
pain can see how they can help others too,
Yeah.
and it kind of gets you out of your own way. And I love that group dynamic that
I
gets
love the group as
created.
well because you're learning from
Yeah,
each other. And that's kind of the same thing
yeah,
what we were doing, we called story time, right? You're learning
yeah,
through stories. And that's where we build a
absolutely.
lot of our, resilience from and energy
Yeah.
and just feel good is through other people's stories. And that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I've done workshops at funeral homes.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
organizations have reached out to me, community care organizations have reached out to me. I've run grief cafes at a local library, and just like doing like a bit of an educational thing. And I have conversation prompters, and we split up the room into little tables so that
Nice.
people aren't feeling like they have to speak to a whole room of people, but can have like small pods of people and conversation starters just to get the conversation going, because it's like, where do you start, right? And it's already an awkward conversation.
Yeah.
So just to get them talking, and then there's an opportunity at the end to step into doing the program. So I have an 8-week program, and a lot of people want one-on-one. So I've done over the years a lot of one-on-one counseling, and I can see the benefit of that too, because then they get all the attention, they get to dig deep, and
Mm.
some people just, it's a privacy thing, and it's intimate and it's vulnerable. So when they connect with me, it's like that's who they want to work with. So I've done a lot of that over the years, but also over the years, like with mental health getting a lot more buzz,
Hmm.
um, I've seen how my grief was a mental health issue, but it was never really defined that way back 25 years ago.
Hmm.
So I started kind of tapping into that so that people could understand that when they were dealing with mental health issues, that a lot of times underneath it's grief. So I was kind of starting to promote that. And I've gone into organizations and taught mental health strategies because I thought, if I had known those strategies, I might have been able to move through my grief a little bit, maybe faster. Like, and you know what? I don't regret anything about my grief journey. It was what it was, and it was exactly the way it was supposed to be for me.
Hmm.
But I just think, wow, if I had known, I would have like taken care of myself a little bit better. I might have set
Hmm.
some boundaries a little bit more. I might have not worried so much about what people thought. Like, so teaching those strategies and those mental health strategies and self-care tools um, can kind of set you up, because life is going to happen and losses are going to happen. It's inevitable. And I see that now as I look at my past and all the losses I had. And so if you have those strategies, they just kind of naturally kick in, and it's
Hmm.
not a one and done thing. It's like it's a practice, right? So if you're daily doing self-care and taking care of your mental health, then when loss does hit you, you have those tools in your pocket. So I've been doing that in organizations, and also the other thing that I've noticed too, I work with a lot of women. I've worked with men too, but a lot of women, when they come in walking through the door, it's maybe about a death. But as we peel back the layers, I'm seeing that there's, like I say, all those other losses.
Hmm.
But I've seen, like, I've kind of summarized it into 6 categories, 6 major milestones that happen in life and throughout our careers as professional women. We deal with inequality. We deal with balance. We deal with union, whether or not to get married, and when you're going through divorce and mixed families and all those things, and then birth and menopause and death. So, death is the one that I have specialized in over the years, but I can see how these big 6 milestones affect all our lives. So
Correct.
I'm just in the process now of finalizing an ebook about exploring those 6 major milestones.
And I think that's a great idea also because like when I first, read, you came over to be on the podcast, when I saw grieving, and one thing it was, like, right? We always think death, and
Yeah.
it is. But as you speak and you're explaining, it's more than just that. Now, what about, I'm just circling to say grief, but depression, like say, okay, even if someone doesn't pass away, grief, depression is kind of a fine line, I think a little bit with that, right? I mean, you could be depressed
Yes.
and you're grieving, and it's just like a different term Maybe I'm being wrong about
Yes.
that, but when I think it's could
Well,
be,
yeah, and I
it's
mean, I
not.
don't have a medical background, so I'm
That's all right.
always
We know
kind of
more
cautious.
sometimes
Yeah,
from our
I hear
experience.
you.
No,
All
of our
right.
experience. Oh
But I
no.
remember my counselor at the time saying that because I said I'm so depressed, and she's like, "No, Cheryl,
Hmm.
you're grieving." And it's like, "Yeah, but I'm depressed." And she's like,
Yeah.
"The difference between grief and depression," she said, "is that you still have a sense of humor." And I thought, "Oh, okay."
Well,
And
I know people
once,
that went through depression. It's not a good outcome, and they
yeah.
were always
Oh,
laughing.
oh, was that right? Okay, well, there you go. Yeah, there you go. But
Yeah,
it
it just
kind of
happened yesterday, in
defined it. It
fact.
framed it.
Yeah.
Oh, is that right? Oh, God bless them.
Yeah.
It framed it for me, and it let me sit in the place of grief
Hmm.
and let that be okay. Like I almost needed to give myself permission to be grieving and
Hmm.
not have to label it as a depression.
I
But of
got you. It's
course,
all,
it looked the same way, right?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It's just like I said, a different term.
yeah.
Um, so that's great to come up with something that you can kind of, I don't want to say shift it into that gear, but when people come to you, like you said, over death, but if you can work with people that are going through a depression, it's
Mhm.
all the same thing, peeling back the layer,
It
peeling them
is.
back and seeing what's
It's,
causing
yeah,
it.
it
Um,
so is. Yeah.
yeah. You also mentioned, as reading, you focus on professional women. Is there a reason for that?
Um, It's just who has tended to gravitate to me.
Hmm.
And maybe that's because I've been a professional woman my whole
Hmm.
adult life, that those are the people that tend to relate to me. But like I say, like I've worked with men too. It's not like
Hmm.
I won't work with men,
I got you.
but sometimes when you're branding, you kind of have to pick an avatar, if you will,
Hmm.
or a target market.
Hmm.
And I just looked back on all my clients and I thought, yeah, the ones that I could say like had huge breakthroughs and that have wonderful stories to share, were women who had lost their husbands. And so I spent a bit of time, just marketing to that audience.
I understand.
And
Hmm.
yeah, they have had miraculous results. There was this one woman, she was 57 and her husband died, and she was a supervisor at her work, but she couldn't work. She couldn't, take care of her staff. She couldn't take care of herself,
Mm.
and so she didn't want to live. And, she had no motivation. She was seeing a counselor and she was just like you say, depressed, right?
Hmm.
And grieving and not wanting to move forward. And she did my program. And after well, I mean, you like I say, you peel back the layers, and it turned out she got complete about an old dream that she had had that got crushed by her dad when she was 19. She wanted to go to art school,
Hmm.
and she saw how that loss had played out in her life as we mapped it out and looked at it. And after she took the course, she ended up quitting her job, selling her house. She moved from Ontario to Ottawa, or
Hmm.
sorry, from Toronto to Ottawa, and she went to art school. And she started a new relationship, and it was like,
Wow. Yeah.
who is this woman? Like the
Yeah.
transformation was just unbelievable.
Yep.
And I see that time and time again. Another woman, um, she was in Virginia, and she had lost her husband and was devastated, and they had all these travel plans, and they were hikers, and she just couldn't see her future in front of her. But even before we finished the course, she booked herself on a solo hike
Hmm.
trip, and it
Yeah.
was like she's gonna be fine.
Hmm.
So it's all about learning how to remap your life. And I mean, like, what is life now without him? And who am I without him?
It, it,
So and it's not
it,
easy to do on our own.
no, it's not, Cheryl. And I'm listening to you, and and again, we talk, we're in podcast, but it's always just conversation. We try to make a conversation. So it's not about me. I
Yeah,
mean, I get it. We're talking about you, but I'm
yeah,
listening to what you're saying. And I did write a book, taken forever to get published, but it should be. And it's the divorce blueprint, but it sounds like what you're saying. I did
mhm,
the same exact thing because I did coaching and I do the same thing. It's
yeah,
identical. It's the grief, right? They're
yeah,
grieving.
yeah,
And I always say, go back. What did you want to do before you? I always say rewind. Normally
Mm.
you don't, right? You're like, oh, move forward, move forward.
Right. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
gotta heal. You gotta heal. You gotta go on, go on. No, in order to
No.
heal, it's unfortunate, but we have to go back.
Yes,
Very
we do.
similar. It's a very similar
Yeah.
comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't
So
say goodbye until we say hello to that person and what
yeah,
they were to us.
yeah,
We can't move forward until we go back. Yeah,
I
you're
get
right.
it.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, I love it. Um,
Yeah.
so you wrote your it's this you're an author of it's a workbook? Is that
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah. When I was I was going through this period where it was like, how do I reach more people? I wanted to
mhm,
work with more people. And, I was doing some praying about it and some meditation about it. And I remember one day in meditation, the answer I got was, what if it wasn't about you? And it was like, oh, what if it wasn't about me wanting to work with other
Yeah,
people?
but it's all because we start with us.
Of course we
So
do.
we go like
Everything's about me.
sometimes I do feel like that because you're trying to explain, like, I know what I'm talking about. I did it. I went through it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so cute. Yeah, I get it.
So I thought,
Funny.
okay, well, if it wasn't about me, then I would just want people to have access to
Hmm.
the lessons I've learned, the pitfalls, how to avoid them, um, how to move forward. So that was my answer. It was like put it down on paper. So I
Mm.
started writing a book, and it took about a year, and I just, puttered away at it and just kept writing. And I just knew from my own healing, because of the way I learn, I'm an experiential learner. So
Hmm.
I wanted
Hmm.
it to be a workbook that people would reflect on and be introspective, but also journal. I was a journaler too. My whole life, I always had a diary when I was younger. So I just, I kind of still, it's
That's
about
funny.
me, right? That's
Yeah,
the way
well,
I learn.
yeah,
So
but that's how it's us. We're
yeah,
talking
yeah.
from our experience, so it is.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So that's why I
Yeah. So
took the approach of doing a workbook. So
nice.
and I wrote it in the analogy of walking through a forest. And so there's rest stops and so time for reflection and you do one chapter at a time and work through it and let it unpack
I
over the
like that.
week.
Yeah.
And then the next week we come back and we take up the answers from the previous chapter. So yeah,
Very nice. Do you have a picture of that book with you?
I do. I can
Yeah, let's
grab
show that
it.
book and where they can purchase this book, or if it's an
Sure.
ebook, if it's a online.
Yeah.
My good
It's
grief.
My
Okay,
Good
My Good
Grief.
Grief, Healing from Loss.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And it's on
Great.
Amazon,
It's on Amazon.
Amazon.com and Amazon.ca and the
Okay.
European Amazon sites as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
very nice for that one. Yeah, good.
Mhm.
Good, good. And so let's see here. So we got the lessons you've learned. Basically, we was kind of done a lot with that. Anything else you want to talk about? The community, you already mentioned the community too. You kind of like this is not your first podcast. We always try to make lists of like maybe some questions, but you kind of rolled right in. You know what you're doing, Cheryl.
Yeah.
And I
Thank you.
you can have your own podcast.
I'm working on it. I
Yeah,
am working on it. I'm working with the TV producer and yeah, we definitely want to get something
yeah,
going for sure. Yeah.
very cool.
I guess what I would say, like when you say community, it was so important to me, the
Hmm.
community, having good people around you. And one of the things I had to learn, which was tough, was, some people, when you're with them and you share what you're going through, you feel worse after sharing it. And some people, it's like you're neutral. And some people you feel better. And for me, I had to distinguish who my people were.
Hmm.
And not that I didn't hang around with the people, but I would be selective about what I shared because you're so vulnerable and so raw during those acute stages of grief. So I was just very careful who I shared with
Hmm.
and got to know who my people were. And I lost a lot of friends, quite truthfully. I mean, that happened when I went through my divorce. And, it gets really clear who your friends are and who your people
Mm.
are. And so I had already gone through that process after my divorce. But then when Rachel died, it was like another layer of people who just kind of dispersed. It was like they didn't know how
Wow.
to be with it, and
They don't know
that's
how to deal with
okay.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So um, I'm so happy to know that the people that left standing
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
that time that were my people, they're still my people.
Yeah.
Like
Well, there
that
you weeded them
is
out quick, right?
so precious. So,
Mm,
yeah, things get really clear really fast.
yeah, I
And
agree.
that's one of the gifts. It's grief is not easy and it's not fun to go through,
Hmm.
but I'll tell you, I mean, the lessons and the joy and the like, just the pure wisdom that you get from going through that process, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Mm.
Yeah.
And uh, uh, which is good, but you're right about that, how some people could run because as sad as this is, I think we've all been on that other side too,
Yeah.
where people don't stop talking about it.
Hmm.
And I almost feel sometimes that you need this. You need someone to
Yeah.
talk to about grief, what you're doing, because yes. So and it's just and it's very similar. I'm talking about where this it's very similar to a divorce. And it is.
Oh, yes,
And
it
it's
is.
it's very much the same because there's somebody been
Yep.
in your life all your life or whoever, now they're gone. It's like you grieve. I wrote that
Yeah.
too. It's all the same, very similar. Same
Yeah.
thing. People don't want to constantly hear about that. They don't
Yeah.
want to constantly hear about your divorce and what you're going through. Then you're labeled like a Debbie Downer. So
Yeah.
people, so you need these outlets. You need the outlets
Hmm.
for the divorce coaching. You need the therapist or coaching. You do similar to coaching, uh,
Yep.
to people that are grieving. You need
Yeah.
these outlets, and they just need to be little. Maybe they are more. Maybe you could find them more. I mean, I don't really look for them, but maybe you
Hmm.
can. But they're
Yeah.
they're definitely necessary because
Yeah.
I've had it with myself. I've had people that I've known that have gone through stuff that I'm like, all right, already.
Yeah.
We've all been there, but like, all right, it's been
Yeah.
3, 4, 5 years. You gotta, you need help.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't mean it to make it sound funny, but you do,
No.
because you
No.
will
No.
lose friends.
Yeah.
I'm not
You
talking about
can
the initial
tell,
hit. I'm talking about
you
like
can,
three, four,
yeah.
5 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. You can tell a healed heart versus an unhealed heart.
Yeah,
You're still bleeding all over the place and
yeah.
yeah, it's
And it's
uncomfortable.
important
It's
that they
uncomfortable for
recognize it.
everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, it's important that they recognize, okay, wait a minute, I still can't get over it. Or do they feel guilty to get over something too quick? There could
Yeah.
be a guilt to that as well, right? Like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
I can't go on with my life. How can I go on with my life when I lost somebody that I love? And
Yeah.
it's been, 3, 4 years, and I'm sure
Yeah.
that's what you handle in
I know
your,
when Rachel died, I wanted to keep the grief close because it made me
hmm
feel like I was close to her. Like it kept
right.
me in this like place of love, it felt like.
Yeah,
But it was actually the opposite. It was once I let go, then my heart was freed up to let the love in.
right. Well, that's
But
kind of what
you
I was
don't, yeah, but you don't
trying to
see
say.
that at
Yeah.
first, right? Yeah.
But you got to
Yeah.
let it go to heal. It's like,
Yes.
it's all the same scenario,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
have to let it go
Yeah.
to heal. Otherwise, you bleed profusely. And then you're just
Yes.
going to keep doing that until you could heal. And there is guilt to let go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
100%. There's a guilt to
Yeah.
say, okay, I can't. If I stop feeling bad, that means I forgot about them and I'm no good.
Yeah.
And I think that's important too when dealing with pe people in grief. Yeah.
Yeah, guilt is such a destructive emotion. It's like, oh boy, if there's guilt, we're dealing with that one because it
Yeah.
is
Oh,
so
well,
destructive.
I think a lot of people do
Yeah,
feel grief
yeah,
or guilty. Like, how
yeah,
can I live like this? And but it's great that you started this program. I think
yeah.
it's fantastic. And let's
Thank
see,
you.
any future projects that you plan on doing? Like, you got your book and
Yeah,
let's
I'm
just move
I'm
a little,
working
yeah.
on yeah, I'm working on the big six. I'm sure that ebook should be ready in the
Yeah,
next
you
week or
said that.
two,
Mhm.
so that'll be a free download off of the website. I'm going to be doing a pilot webinar next week to just kind of introduce that big six, and then there'll be a program, a 6-month program
Mhm.
following that. So that's what I'm working towards, and just build community around it.
Mhm.
Let's open the conversation and let's support each other. Women are so good at that,
Yes.
and sometimes in our busy lives, we can kind of get away from that, and I think COVID did a number on that for us as well,
Mhm.
unless you really put the effort in to keep community going. I know a lot of organizations, women are having trouble now that they're back in the workplace, how to create community again. So that's what I want to do going forward.
Nice. Okay. And I also want you to, well, we'll put your website up as well,
Sure.
all that.
Okay.
But you can just say it, because again, in case they're listening on the radios, or what is your website if they want to
Yeah, sure.
contact you?
www.adaptdna.com.
Okay.
So adaptability was the name of the game for me when I was going through my grief. I saw
Mhm.
that much later. I thought, what was it that had me move forward? And it was like, yes, adaptability skills, and we have them in our
Mm,
DNA naturally. So that's where the adapt DNA came in.
beautiful. Mhm.
So yeah,
Very nice. Great. Great. It was great to meet you, Cheryl. I hope to maybe see you
you
again in the
too.
future once you get
Yeah.
your other program up. And
Yes, yes. I'll
would
have you
love
on
to
my
see.
show.
Yeah, but I'd love to see how that goes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm
And
excited.
yeah. Anything else you'd like to talk about before we wrap it up?
No,
You got
just
it's your
thank you so
time.
much. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I hope that people take away something and,
Yeah.
like choose healing and rediscover the beauty of life.
Love it. Love it. Thank you,
Mm.
Cheryl. That's Cheryl Parker, and she is the author of that her book. We're going to edit this. We're editing that. But uh, thank you, Cheryl, for being on the podcast Storytime with Ellie, where everybody has a story.
You're
And I want
welcome.
to thank you again. And don't go away. I'm going to stay on here once we start. So,
Okay,
thanks again.
thank you.
Mhm.